Welcome to yet another episode of Indigenization Appreciation Hour. I'm Saurav and with me is my long-term associate Sriram Tyagarajan. So there's much to discuss today, as there always is after something, after some event. Although in this case it wasn't just an event; it was basically a mini conflict that spanned all of 4 days. We've discussed a bit about, what were the key takeaways from this conflict for us, for the Indian side, and what are the things we need to focus on going forward. We're going to do more of that today. And of course, our focus is now going to be on the eastern frontier because that is where India's challenge, that is basically where India's primary uh, threat is focused or concentrated. Pakistan is after all what you call a lesser included problem in the Indian scheme of things. The main threat is obviously from the People's Republic of China, which benchmarks itself with the United States of America and likes to think that India is a lesser included problem for it. So that is the sort of thing that we need to fix. We cannot have them, underestimating India to this extent, because such underestimation of, you could argue it could lead to their becoming overconfident, but it would also lead to, deterrence failing, and deterrence has failed once along the line of actual control. In the summer of 2020, deterrence did fail. Of course, much was done to restore deterrence, and it is still an open question whether it's been restored to the extent that we need it to be restored or not. So that is why we need to focus on the eastern frontier, and we need to take a closer look at the sort of things that we will have to do in the next, I would say, 36 months to ensure that the so called northern adversary or eastern adversary, basically the People's Republic of China, does not attempt some kind of a joint campaign in tow with Pakistan, right? Or by itself, although by itself is unlikely. The Chinese usually don't like to leave things to chance, which is why they assaulted peaks when those were devoid of troops. Right? They did not launch a frontal assault anywhere. They basically occupied strategic features that were simply not defended at the time. That is what they did in the summer of 2020, and they also violated a whole, gamut of confidence building measures that had been built up over time between India and China while they did so. So that is how they operate. But the point is that we must also keep in mind the kind of, military capability they've built up. So by one count, I mean by the count of the Defense Intelligence Agency of America, they have some 3,100 ballistic missiles at their disposal. I'm talking about the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, obviously, which is a full blown service now, has been since 2015. So, and out of those, and I'm not, I and they have another 400 ground launch cruise missiles as well. Those are all subsonic, presumably. So out of those 3,100 ballistic missiles, some 400 are ICBMs. So obviously they are looking at now parity with the Americans and the Russians, at least in that realm. Some 900 are short-range ballistic missiles, about 1,300 are medium-range ballistic missiles, right? And the rest are intermediate range ballistic missiles, basically, and the newer one that is made up of the DF-26 essentially. That inventory, the IRBM inventory, is made up of DF-26s in the main. So it's a fairly modern ballistic missile force. Obviously, that is what you'll expect of the PLARF, and they've been at it for a long time. On top of this, China today owns about 1,000 satellites in Earth orbit. There are 1,000 Chinese satellites in Earth orbit, and 500 of those are EOIR capable. Okay, are remote sensing of the remote sensing variety. Now, obviously, some of them would have, sort of resolutions that aren't very useful for military purposes, but many have a overt military role anyway, right? We can safely assume that 250 to 300 of those have a military role for certain. So that's, and on top of all this, the Chinese have deployed counter space systems in geosynchronous orbit also, right? Or counter space systems that are capable of attacking targets in geosynchronous orbit. They have a new satellite called Shijian 21, which can be used as a co-orbital ASAT system. So what we are and they've unbundled. They don't have that PLA strategic support force anymore. They now have a cyber force, a space force, and and basically an electronic warfare force also. I mean, an information force. They have a third force as well now. At one time, they had touted the PLA Strategic Support Force as a much higher level, as a superior form of organization than the U.S. Cyber Command and the U.S. Space Force. But now they seem to have unbundled all of those again, and they unbundled it into three different entities. Anyway, so the question is that, so this is what they're doing. Now we are since 1962 we have been obsessed with the one issue only, which is to deny any significant loss of territory to the PLA ground force in the event that it chooses to cross the line of actual control in force. Right? This has been our agenda. And initially the agenda was that we would keep the border areas sort of untouched, untrammeled, in their pristine state, so that it becomes that much more difficult for the PLAGF to sort of enter and make its way through Indian territory. Over time we changed that, and we realized that they would just salami slice and build the roads themselves. So we launched our own counter, mutually assured construction program in right earnest. Now I'll come to why I'm mentioning this, but suffice it to say that they will never begin a campaign with some kind of ground based attack. The attack that we will face from the Chinese, for if we do face one, that is, for the foreseeable future, will be one that will be concentrated in the air and space domains. Of course, they're also continuously looking to posture forward in the Indian Ocean region, but despite the group think of the at the moment, the seas are not going to be that much of a bother for us before the mid 2030s. What should be a more concern to us is a joint air and space campaign by the Pakistanis and Chinese sometime in the next 36 months, or less. I would say the window is actually smaller. It's more like sometime in the next 18 to 20 months. But it's not something that should be dismissed as alarmist, so on and so forth. We've discussed why we think so in a previous episode. We'll discuss this again in the course of this program. Okay, now before I turn to Shriram for his views on the matter, let me just say that we would we are we would be happy if the viewers of this program can continue to support this particular channel, and for that purpose you can contribute directly to our UPI UPI ID, which is SJDR LTD 2367 at UPI. Shyam, would you be kind enough to just project that on the screen?
Yep.
Because a lot of people ask us how they can support DDR's YouTube channel, and this is the way to do it in my view. You can directly send your support to this particular UPI ID, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, we pay GST on your contributions. So I think he's going to project it.
Yeah, just give me a couple of minutes. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, so even as sort of Sriram projects it, and before he sort of gives his viewpoint, I can take maybe a question from Lakshmi Shah KS, who says, did 38 LC have any role in Op Sindoor, and what is the performance? What was the performance like? 2. Mate a hypersonic cruise missile container with R-73 type modern A2A missile, and we can build 1500 kilometer SAM. Well, the LCA were deployed as before Op Sindoor began. I think there were plenty of there was a lot of reportage which suggested that the LCA had been deployed to a forward air base. I think even some images were there circulating in we found some images circulating in the internet, on the internet, to that effect. So they would have, I think they might have played a role, but let's wait a bit to find out for certain, and also to get any details as may be revealed by the powers that be. The second question is about
QR code and
yeah,
the UPI ID are on
yeah,
screen right now.
yeah. Please use these to send your support to us. Please be as generous as you want to be. And as I said, we pay sort of A on everything, GST on everything. The second question was that Lakshmi sir says that why don't we mate a hypersonic? We can mate a hypersonic cruise missile container with 4 or 5 R-73 type modern A2A missile, and we can build 1400 kilometer. I mean, okay, you're talking about a propulsion scheme where the arts, or you're talking about the front end mated. See, but it's actually not that simple. The Anything which sort of can prosecute targets 1,000 miles away or 1,600 kilometers away will have to be an ab initio development. I mean, you won't be able to create a chimera, sort of a technological chimera, and get there. And it'll require a new kind of propulsion scheme, which I won't talk about at this moment, to get to that kind of range in the kind of time frame that you would want it to, to get to that range in a suitable kind of time frame. So within a suitable operational within a suitable attack time frame, it'll have to be really fast, and for that you need a different kind of propulsion scheme. Anyway, we'll discuss that in the next meeting. Now I think I'll hand it over to Sriram. Sriram, what are your views on the kind of threats we face, and according to you, what are the things we should focus on just in the next 20 months? So let's talk about what's doable.
Yeah, we've seen multiple things happening in the last 5 years. Yeah. So the first was.
Can't hear you.
One sec.
I don't think we can hear you.
No, I can.
Try.
No, one sec. Can people hear me?
Can everybody hear Sriram? Will you reply?
Yeah. See, yeah. So let's not even go back. Okay, good. So let's not even go back to the last 5 years. Let's go back to Doklam, right? So Doklam was 2017, middle of summer, right? So since then, whatever deterrence that we had about action on the ground not happening, or having enough deterrence to avoid any such clashes on the ground, on the front, beyond what we've seen in videos before that of hands tied behind the back and pushing and shoving, stuff like that. Not even like actively pushing, but I'm sure everybody's seen videos where the soldiers have been holding their hands behind themselves and just forming a line, and when the PLA soldiers from the other side come with flags, and then they say, this is our area, you have to go back, and all of that. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's on Saurav's end. Yeah, it's not mine. Saurav, can you turn off your mic and turn it on?
Yeah, turn it off now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's still quite a bit of interference from somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, so like I said, the Chinese have been pushing, right? So right from Doklam all the way to Galwan. Galwan was a very serious push. I think they tried it maybe because of the switchover happening and the whole country was going under lockdown and whatever. But even that was even Doklam. Yeah, no, I think it should be fine. Just trying to remove all of that noise. Yeah. So I hope that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll be able to hear me.
I was just fiddling with the audio. Now it's okay. So yeah. So from Galwan, right, the scale of the issue became much larger than whatever we've seen before that. Before that, it was very minor. Like I said, it was some posts, some. Come on. Yeah, okay. Some posts, some grazing ground, one or two places here or there, they would come with flags and say, this is our area, this is part of China, you have to go back. Some pushing, shoving happened, and then things got figured out. But Doklam was a lot bigger, right? We saw a lot of people being pushed into one particular sector, one particular post, in fact. And this is when both sides knew that there was presence on the other side, right? It's not like suddenly one fine day one side came to that place and said, nay, we will not let you play cricket in our place, right? So that didn't happen because there was construction until then, and then suddenly they crossed the line that we thought should not be crossed, and that's when everything happened. So now after Galwan, right, where these guys have come up and taken over posts in places that we were claiming, and the back and forth happened, and they came in a lot heavier strength and caused issues, and we had to move forward, deploy a lot more stuff like armor and all right on top of a pass and all that, and all is like a lot stronger in terms of getting closer to possible conflict. So since then, even though we've let's say brought down the temperature, but there's some kind of point of view where they don't really seem to be entirely okay or being willing to back down entirely and go back to how things were in, say, early March 2020. Right? They do not seem to want to go back there. They want this to be the new normal. Everywhere else where we've had heightened tensions have sort of subsided, but especially around the Pangangso area and similar areas, they do not want to take a step back. So now this might appear to be some sort of a face-saving manner, or an inability or an unwillingness to accept the fact that they were the aggressor this time, and moving back entirely is sort of an admission that sorry, we tried to take advantage, but you guys were awake and we couldn't do it. I mean, somehow maybe you can think of it as something on those lines, but I'm not really sure. But now, okay, that is one post, one sector, one front, maybe one stretch of your entire front. And now we've got Pakistanis who've been sending in terrorists in attacking armed forces and civilians in Jammu and Kashmir for the past 3-4 years. All of them have been on a lower scale, and most of them until Riyasi and Pahalgam have been against the army. So it's sort of flown under the radar. Media has not really hyped up any of those attacks. We even had one attack was on an army, Air Force truck who were servicing a radio or a radar station or something. So things were serious, but they kind of flew under the radar. But then we had Riyasi happen first, and then after that Pahalgam, and the brown matter hit the fan. So we had to then open up an entire front on the west, all the way from Karachi to Sargodha and Bawalpur, and further north all the way up to Noor Khan. So, and we've shown that we can pretty much flatten the Pakistanis within 24 hours. Right? They refuse to come out and play. So that's pretty much a win. Once you have air superiority, then the ground war becomes that much easier. Now, we also have the Bangladesh situation, which is not getting any better. Yunus seems to be on the way out, but we have Starlink, getting approval, and we're seeing, I saw some videos on Twitter of American soldiers in Bangladesh, in some coastal area, and we know that there've been multiple media reports in India about the reason Hasina being deposed and the whole green revolution, whatever they want to call it, student revolution so-called, happened because she did not agree to giving the Americans a foothold to act against the Chinese from within Bangladesh. against the Chinese, against supposedly the Myanmaris because of the civil war there. And we've had our Manipur problems also, which, there is enough cause to think that it is a fallout of the problems in Myanmar. And the problems in Myanmar are, even if you give like 50-60% of the reason to internal squabbles, the Chinese have had their hands inside there for a very long time, and having an unrest or unsettled eastern area is not good for us if we want to expand, grow these states. Because ultimately, when you want to move up the ranks, right, we've become fourth biggest now. If you want to get to second, third, whatever, you need everybody, all cylinders firing. You can't have an entire northeast, 5 of the 7 states in civil war strife. So keeping them down is not good for us. And it also means that you cannot use those states properly if you want to fight a war in the east. We were talking in the previous IAH. It's not just the north. People keep thinking that they're sitting somewhere in the middle of Madhya Pradesh, and the only way to look at the Chinese is through Nepal, right, into the heart of Tibet. So that's one way to see it. But there's also the way where you sit in Calcutta and you look east, right? So over Bangladesh, over Myanmar, all the way to Kunming. So that is another vector that people need to be aware of, because neither Bangladesh nor Myanmar is going to tell any incoming PLA fighter, don't come into our airspace. They have neither the capability nor the balls to tell the Chinese to not utilize their airspace, either for missile attacks or for any airborne incursion, be it fighters or transports or paratroopers. So that is a vector that we have to keep an eye on. And we know that the Chinese do keep an eye on from that side, because there's a brand new large aperture phased array radar there that they're building. So all of these vectors are there, and we have to look at all of these vectors, and we have the entire IOR to keep an eye on. I tweeted about it yesterday also. Right? There are these massive Chinese fishing fleets that roam around and do bottom trawling and just make a massive mess of anything that's underwater, right? So we have a very huge fisherman population that is very dependent on fishing. The industry is, not that high margin, and a lot of exports also happens to Europe and the US. So if our fishing industry gets impacted because the Chinese come in one fine day with, say, some 500 ships overnight and stay there for a couple of months and then destroy the ecosystems, then it is a long-term issue for us. And I don't know how many people know, but even the Chinese were similar to us, right? The fishing fleets used to be very coastal and easy level fishing boats, which wouldn't be able to go very far. And Mao said, you guys have to buck up and go out into the ocean and have bigger fleets and bigger boats and do more deep fishing, deep sea fishing. I can't hear you, Saurav. Turn on the mic.
Actually, they started mechanizing their fleets with diesel engines a long time ago, back in the 60s. Now, I'll just say something here. My father was actually involved in mechanizing many fishing boats along the coast of Tamil Nadu and Kerala when he was a part of Kirloskar. So he actually mechanized several hundred thousands actually along the coastline. I mean, he was Kirloskar that was a government program.
Yeah. So like I said, we have fronts everywhere, right? 360 degrees. Yeah. So our thought process also needs to be 360, and we also have to look up, right? The space, like Saurav said, and we keep repeating every single time, space thing also needs to be looked at. So it's like any way you touch, it's like multiple tens of billions of dollars that we need to spend every year to create enough deterrence. Not saying we'll get into a fighting match with the Chinese and come on top.
Yes,
deterrence will prevent war.
Our job is deterrence. Our job is deterrence because of what you said, because we need to grow, we want to grow. In any case, our global posture is deterrence anyway. It's not, investing other people's countries and expanding our ambit that way. That is not India's. In any case, the Prime Minister says this is not an era of war. I don't think India has ever believed that any era was about war. It was always about self defense. So, deterrence is that noble sort of strategy that India has long adopted. But the thing is that in the next 18 to 20 months, the one thing we definitely need to focus on is counter space capability, because that is an asymmetric counter to what the Chinese have. The Chinese have a massive space based architecture now, well, near massive almost, with 250 sort of remote sensing and military oriented remote sensing satellites in the sky, of which many have a footprint over India, by the way. And we'll put that up in a subsequent program, because we mapped that. Delhi Defense Review has mapped that. And if you want to support such thing, you should of course use the QR code and the UPI link that I've given to show us, to aid us with such objectives. Anyway, but the thing is, so that is the one area that we definitely need to focus on. And ISRO and and the private companies that we have, they need to operationalize those low Earth orbit capable satellite launch vehicles without any further delay. I mean, you talked about the SSLV in a previous program. I mean, SSLV integration rates have to be what they said it would be, which is about one per week. They should be able to integrate, and money should be made available by the government to accomplish this task. It would also enable us to create many more systems for the rocket force, by the way, because of the nature of the propellants used in the SSLV, right? And so on and so forth. So that is one area. The other area is another low hanging fruit would be the Indian Army. While it is true that once you attain air superiority, or of course, or air supremacy itself, it becomes that much easier to target the enemy's ground forces, no doubt about it. But the enemy's ground forces also have plenty of tricks up their sleeve. I mean, the Russians, for instance, even with a much larger air force, were not able to attain air superiority, and even if they attained localized air superiority, they were not able to generate sufficient the kind of effects necessary to allow their ground forces to move forward quickly, right? It's still been a slog. That's because ground forces are also today have a lot of places to hide, and can invest in deterrence by denial technology. They can invest in air defenses, obviously. So ground based air defenses are proving their worth all over the world. So that is something that in the Indian Army needs to do. It really needs to increase the density of air defenses all over what is called Eastern Command, basically Eastern Army Command. Eastern Army Command needs to increase the density of air defenses by at least 5 to 10, in my view, and all kinds. I mean, from the very lowest end that sort of takes on a small drone. I mean, kinetically, we are talking about something like an L-70 and a ZU-23. If required, we should, import more of those and produce some more via the surge capacity that the OFB has, and others, and obviously put the latest EOIR systems on them, which have been displayed also. I mean, you can see pictures of those on Twitter, and those are all coming from private firms in India, and of course, BEL is also contributing. So you augment yourself from the very lowest end to the very highest end, which in the case of the army would be the MRSAM, which is called Abra in Indian Army Service, right? And there is an S400 unit deployed in the Northeast. Let's not go into details of that, but we need more of that as well. So that is the other thing. The other thing that and of course, but that is of course the Indian Air Force's remit, not the army's. The Indian Air Force operates the S400. The Indian Army does not. The other thing that we can do is we can push everything underground wherever possible, and create these. We keep talking about improving forward defended localities, and for and FSCs, and hardening other things sort of upfront. So those have to be done on a war footing. We need to the army needs to super harden operational structures. It needs to push whatever it can underground. It needs to increase the density of its air defenses greatly. And another area which we don't know whether it is still an area of focus or not for the army. Ideally, it should be, probably it is, but I'll say it nevertheless. And this is important for all armies that are in sort of deterrence by denial mode, is that the infantry itself needs to focus on camouflage and concealment. Camouflage and concealment techniques that are relevant to the operational environment of today, where you have many, you have you have a situation where there is a sort of spread of sensors, and you have hyperspectral sensors also available. You have an enemy which is sort of mapping you every 24 hours from space as well. So you need to focus a lot on camouflage and concealment, and the infantry has to take the lead, because after all, it has a lot of manpower also, right? It has to hide itself. It can help with the other arms also hide themselves. So obviously this has to be an army wide practice. So these are things that can actually be done in the next 18 to 20 months, because the air defenses that I'm talking about can be sourced from domestic industry, or even from, some of it can even be sourced from surplus East European stocks which are still there. So all that can, and then of course augmented with modern electro optics and electro optical infrared systems and modern targeting systems. AI enabled systems are also now being fielded by us, as you've seen by some of the well known private companies which are in the defense space. So that is one thing. As far as the Indian Air Force is concerned, I think we need to integrate the R-37 on the Sukhoi 30 MKI without further delay. I mean, just integrating RVV, SD, and all will not work. We need to deploy those VHF and UHF counter stealth radars on a sort of on an emergency basis, and integrate them with the IACCS, because obviously you'll have to integrate, and you'll have to make sure that they are sort of contributing in value terms as far as augmenting the air situation picture is concerned, vis-a-vis low RCS targets. So that is the other thing that we need to focus on. We also need to about the S400s, we have to somehow get deliveries expedited. I don't know how that is going to happen, but it, and we need to deploy more MRSAMs. We need to deploy more Akash units. From what I have seen in the papers, it seems that new orders for those are probably on the anvil already, or are already underway. May or may not be. We don't know, but I read something to that effect. So those have to be deployed. Increase, the Air Force has to increase the density of ground-based air defenses. It has to deploy more counter stealth ground-based radars. It has to somehow it has to ensure high serviceability of the six AEW and C systems it has, the three Falcon AVAX and the three indigenous Netra Mark 1s. It has to expedite that Netra Mark 1A program. At least maybe one or two of those, one unit, even if one unit can come in the next 20 months, it will be useful in my view. That is something it should do. The other, get Tejas Mark 1 and the Mark 1As up to full, BVR capability, to the kind of BVR capability you want, with the indigenous Astra Mark 1 and other systems, etc. And obviously, the EW systems on board those jets are, of course, quite modern. And then you have the indigenous ones in the anvil as well. The Air Force will also have to start augmenting its stocks of precision guided munitions, and it needs to get into some serious discussions with the French about the Spectra electronic warfare suite. Because, in my view, we need to have a Spectra EW suite which has a threat library that can cater to a wide range of systems, right? I don't know what the state is right now, and I'm not supposed to know either, because this is a closely guarded matter, and nobody should know apart from those who are supposed to know in the military. But as an analyst, I would say that this is also an arena where I think we should have proper discussions with the French, because we are ordering another 26 sort of Rafales, right, for the Indian Navy, Rafale Maritime. So we need to have some tough conversations with the French, also in terms of being able to integrate domestic weapons onto the Rafale. See, we cannot just keep firing highly expensive French origin weapons from the Rafale. Okay, we need to be able to put our own weapons on that plane. I mean, we paid a lot of money for the Rafale. We've invested a lot into it, and I think we need to get more out of what we've invested in that system. So that is the other thing. Somebody asked a question before I'll just, Sriram will also look at this, but I'm going to take this question right now. Copsis GS asks, hi Saurav, Sriram, is the IF moving to a defensive offense posture without 5th gen jets till 2030? Can 4.5 gen jets, EW platforms AWACS, CCAs, loitering munitions, and long-range A2G missiles deter China. So CCAs, look, we'll get that only by 2030, if then. If some, there has to be major buy-in into CCAs, and there has to be a you have to see that Ghatak, sort of what used to be called the Ghatak, now just called RPSA. You need that program to be really pushed so that it at least and attains IOC by 2030. And in the case of that program, it is doable if you begin today. Okay,
In
as
my
far.
view, though, I think
Yeah, what?
CCA is possibly, at least an IOC version, is possibly the quickest capability we can get in terms of force multiplier. I think you can do IOC by 2030.
Quickest capability we can get is more mid-air launch decoys and ground launch decoys. That is the quickest capability we can get. If we
I'm
just
talking about
flood them with
offensive
that.
capability,
Yeah.
right? Fighters and
Yeah.
a direct import of swans, white swans,
Yeah.
maybe, right? That might
And
happen. That might be the
for,
quickest. But if you
yeah.
want Indian, I think CCA would be your quickest way to get there.
And this 4.5 gen, well, that's what we'll have till 2030, unless the Russians or somebody can do some emergency supply of Su-57s, and we are willing to take that on. And we really think that is worth the time and money. So that's a different question. EW platforms, we can definitely enhance those. We are enhancing those. AWACS, we will have more AWACS by then, by 2030, but we need maybe, like I said, at least one or two more in the next 20 months itself. And then, of course, this is the lowest hanging fruit: more loitering munitions and long range A2G missiles. Now, this is something we really need to increase. We really need to increase holdings of. Right, we need to increase the inventory size of such systems by a factor of maybe 10. And all of it, will it be enough to deter the Chinese? Well, if the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army do all the things that I have already outlined, and they work on all of these, and they work in concert with each other, and we get those counter space systems in orbit, yes, I think we will be able to deter them till 2029. But we'll have to have other programs also moving forward by then if you want to deter them well into the 2030s. Of course, it could well be that the Chinese have a sort of a convulsion in 2029. It could happen. And that I can discuss in some other program. We don't have the time for that. We can, I think, Shriram, what is your view? You talked about CCAs, and why don't you sort of elaborate on why you think we can get those quickly?
See, the Navy has already started, right, on the CCA program with new space research. And, if we actually put pedal to the metal, we can figure out an engine source also for the Abhimanyu class CCA platforms, right? Even the CATS Warrior, they already have a prototype, right? It's not flown yet, but see, this is what I keep saying, right? Our programs meander at the base minimum rate of progress when nobody's looking, right? Everybody's got their own things to look at. So, they finish everything and then come back after 3 years to see, Array, what happened to that program? Right. So that shouldn't be the pace at which we should be moving when we have so many threats around us. And they've shown that they won't wait for us to build up our capability. So if we push all of these guys, right, the CATS Warrior is supposed to be a bigger aircraft. Abhimanyu is much smaller. They have their own reasons as to why. I mean, see, even the CATS Warrior, right? They want something which can be powered by the STFE, right? And another one which can be powered by the HTFE. Now, they are obviously much different weight classes, thrust classes engines, right? So the STFE is around 4.5, 5, which can be, built up maybe all the way up to 8, 9 kilonewtons. And then the HTFE obviously is 25 kilonewton and can go up further because you don't need an afterburning version for a CC aircraft. Or maybe we can build one, right? Build out the entire 40 kilonewton engine for it, and have a mix of subsonic and supersonic. Leave the supersonic ones to do the air battle. So all of this needs to be ideated. The Air Force needs to sit down and talk to HAL, DRDO, the private sector guys, and tell them, okay, these are things that can be done with such networked air force, and this is what we think the adversary is going to do, and these are the capabilities that we want this our network to do. Battlefield ISR, early warning, going out all the way forward and hitting the enemy, diverting them, creating a screen for us, or creating a wall for us so that the slow movers in the back can come and do damage on the ground, stuff like this, right? So I mean, the Air Force is pretty good at I mean, time and time again they've shown that even if you give them a subpar platform, they have the brains to utilize the platform to the maximum and extract great value out of it. Now it is time for them to put on the designer hat and design the future war, how it is going to be fought, and take the help of the producers, designers to write that up, and then that can then become the base for which the platforms are designed and produced. This is an ever moving goalpost, obviously. So it's not like the IAF can tell all of these guys, this is the way a battle is going to be fought in 10 years. That will be a moving goalpost, but as long as everybody is part of the process of defining the requirements, and there is enough flexibility in the whole process, as well as enough buffer for such a change over time, which is only natural, right? So it's not like I make an axe today and I'm going to cut wood and steel tomorrow with it. So that level of flexibility should be built in. But again, it needs drive from the politicians saying, I wanted to get ready to fight, right? And the Air Force has to come back and say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to work with all of these guys and do it. The producers have to come back and say, yes, we will take your word. We will be a part of the process. We won't just sit back and ask for license manufacturing so that it is the least risk for us, because we're putting in a lot of money. And the government should step in and say, okay, we'll backstop you to a good chunk of the whole project so that you're not taking up the entire risk, and we're also putting in our share. So all of this needs to happen, right? And it's not just the CCA itself. Somebody had a question about Kusha, right? So Kusha is almost there. We should have seen flight trials already. I mean, firing trials. So I'm sure we will hear about it. A test might have happened. We don't know. DRDO doesn't tell us everything these days.
Yeah,
So that's part of the whole package, right? You have a brand new architecture in the air where you have manned platforms, and one is too many, right? Assume you have a flight of 3 aircraft, and then they monitor, maybe 30, 40 unmanned wingmen, and that's how the future air battle will go
yeah,
on,
but
and the land battle should be able to deter the opponents.
but nobody's there yet, by the way. The scenario
Nobody's
you
there,
portray,
nobody's there, but that's the
three being
future.
able
That's
to
what
operate
everybody's working
13.
on.
That
No,
is
no,
the
that's what
dream
everybody's
that
working
people
on.
have. Yeah, yeah. Because see,
So we
nobody
also have to
can.
do it.
You cannot train algorithms on the at the edge, as we discussed the other day with Indonil, right? So nobody's there yet. So till neuromorphic computing catches up and can be deployed on airborne platforms, that CCA dream is still into a slightly is somewhat further away. But in the short term, what we can do also in the next 20 months is expedite Project Kusha that you mentioned. We don't know what tests are going on. Some tests may be going on somewhere. We don't know. So the thing is, but given that given what we have seen from DRDO in the last decade, wherein they can finish developmental trials of a missile system within 2 to 3 years from start of program, right? We've seen them being able to finish developmental trials of a missile system from within 2 to 3 years of start of the program of project sanction. So given when Project Kusha was sanctioned, it is not beyond the realm it is not beyond the realm of possibility to see an early deployment of the system sometime in this decade itself, right? A sort of we might see some limited deployment. Of course, this is speculation on my part.
Yeah.
This is not based on
And
any sort of official word or anything, but ground based air defenses is something that India has to focus on, has to harden the things that India needs. Let me repeat: India needs the following if you have to deter the Chinese well into say till at least till 2030. We need that rocket force. The Chinese have 3,100 ballistic missiles at their disposal. Let us assume 60 to 70% of those might have a conventional role. So they may be able to deploy 2,000 missiles, 2,000 ballistic missiles in a conventional role. And let us assume that 50% of those might be allocated to India. So at least 1,000 are available at any time for for prosecuting a war against India. And obviously the policy of today is to respond on impact only. You, even if a gaggle of ballistic missiles head your way, you don't reactively, reflexively assume that those are nuclear armed and a nuclear attack is underway, right? This is what we are seeing in wars around the world. So we have to match them. We have to match those numbers. Here we need a symmetric response, in my opinion, right? Obviously it's also a play of accuracy, survivability, the kind of network you have, the kind of targeting capability you have. Obviously the kind of targeting capability they have is superior to us because of they have a huge space based ISR network, and we need to get there quickly. We need to deploy at least 50 satellites in the next 24 months for such purposes, for military purposes. Although I don't know if anybody is really seized with this idea or not, but those are actually the numbers that are, in our opinion, in Delhi Defense's opinion, we need now, given what we are seeing, on all our frontiers. The other thing we need to focus on is hardening all our air bases and operational military infrastructure. Super hardening. This is a deterrence by denial kind of framework. We need to obviously augment the ground-based air defenses and deploy ballistic missile defenses, or if not anything of the phase one variety, all over the eastern front, because of the threat that the PLARF force poses to us. See, we can't have a scenario where Chabua, Tezpur, and Hashimara are knocked out for 6 to 18 hours by the PLARF, right? Then that will be a dicey situation. We can't have that situation, right? We need to have those. We need to have relief airfields. We need to have proper rehabilitation capabilities, but we also need to super harden whatever we can, and we need to deploy a ballistic missile defense net, and proper ballistic missile defenses, not something like the S-400, which is a like a switchblade and can take on a range of targets. But ballistic missile defenses, which were bespoke ballistic missile defenses systems, which were developed for the purpose of intercepting fast re-entry vehicles, basically, that sort of thing. And that is what we need to deploy
Sim-6.
now all over. Exactly. And we must understand, we also have to get our, somebody mentioned ADAH and ADAM, so we have to have some kind of counter hypersonic glide vehicle capability in place as well, very quickly. Now let us see how that happens. Perhaps domestic options may perhaps there are some domestic options which have become mature enough. We don't know, again, pure speculation. Or maybe there's something that we are discussing with somebody, we don't know about that either. So those are also, because we have to ensure that why that our key air bases don't get struck by DF-17s or DF-27s, and and are out of commission for appreciable windows of time, in which the PLAF can then mount its own campaign. We should not be in a situation like that. The other thing, obviously, so this is on the, obviously, on the land and air front. And we need hardened electronic warfare systems. We need new generation electronic warfare systems, some of which I think DRDO has shown also in expos and stuff like that. And I think there'll be more on those lines. So though these are absolute essentials, and what I mentioned about what the infantry itself needs to do, because under no circumstances should the situation arise where an air campaign, a concerted air campaign by Pakistan and China, also becomes, provides the top cover necessary for the PLA ground force to move forward along the line of actual control. It should not be that should not happen. And for that, the Indian Army has a major role to play, provided it sort of embraces the kind of near surface warfare that it is likely to face in the future. See, the British have coined this term. It's called near surface warfare, to describe this entire new tactical layer of unmanned aviation that ground forces have to contend with nowadays, right? So the Indian Army obviously is totally cognizant of this, and we have seen not just videos, but we've seen them in action. We've seen Army air defense in action, contending with swarms of drones. But in the case when we deal with the Chinese in a scenario where we fight the Chinese directly, be rest assured the drones are going to be of better quality. They are going to have more AI built in them, and the sheer numbers being thrown at us are going to be much higher. Ergo, the need for much denser air defenses from the very low end to the very highest end. We need much more spoofing capability, for instance. We need newer and newer versions of the integrated drone defense and interdiction system that was deployed during Operation Sindoor. There, DRDO showcased a 30 kilowatt laser as part of IDD and IS Mark, or what is called IDD and IS Mark 2A. I think something like that needs to go into production forthwith, given the kind of threats we are facing now. And in the Indian Ocean, I think the Navy knows what it has to do, but the Navy also requires a few things. The Navy, in my view, probably requires more elements for sustenance. So the 5 fleet support ships that are being built at Hindustan Shipyard Limited are obviously going to be very important. But it could also look at more unconventional approaches to augmenting its logistics, in my view, which probably it is, because it is after all a high it's a thoughtful service and usually plans ahead, and that is one thing it needs to do. And I'm talking about just the next, the near future. I'm not talking about things which are I'm not talking about things out to 2035 or so. You have to do much more by then. If the PRC is still around in its current shape, we will have to do much more by 2035. And like Sriram said, all of this is going to cost money. So how we sort of resource for all this, how we allocate resources to all this, and where we get those resources from, are also things that our national planners will have to think about. Okay, Sriram, let's go into some questions.
Yeah, and just think about it. The six Netra Mark 1 A's that the Air Force wants, that itself will cost you a cool 1.5 billion, including the aircraft and the radars and everything. So it will not be cheap. And the A320s will be, I mean, they've got it for free from Air India, but still the radars and mission systems will also cost quite a bit. So just for your airborne surveillance, you're going to spend close to 2.5 billion, right? And they'll have to go in parallel, so you have to spend both together. User XA 101, thank you again for your constant support and contributions. Thank you. Is India working on RDE and oblique wave detonation? I'm not sure about oblique wave, but RDE, for those who don't know, is a rotating detonation engine. There are a couple of really good videos on YouTube. One from Scott Manley on RDE goes into a lot of detail. Do watch it; it's very interesting. Quick summary is, instead of burning fuel, you detonate it. That way, you get more energy release and get a better thrust out of the same amount of fuel. So it's more efficient and all of that. But it's obviously more complex to run an engine like that. So there is at least one IIT which is working on it. Current state of progress and future path is still unclear.
We will have much more to speak about this soon. Okay,
Very soon. Yeah, right. So
yeah.
for now, we'll just say that there is one IIT which is working on it, and we'll bring news to you very soon. We'll probably write in detail
So
after we get all the information.
yeah, so like Sriram said, see, pressure gain combustion, or is nothing new actually. It's this is another throwback to the past, and
V2
but
rockets.
it promises to be much more efficient than deflagrative combustion. Deflagration that goes on in a typical gas turbine, etc. And RDE technology can be used to augment anything. You can have a rotating detonation rocket engine. You can have a rotating detonation ramjet engine. You can augment a gas turbine also with rotating detonation wave technology. Have a detonation wave scheme, right? And
MBD is
RDE has,
working on it.
yeah, and RDE has advantage over pulse detonation also. So yeah, so interesting question. We'll have much more to talk about this in the months ahead, and I can assure you about this. So right now we won't say anything more. Okay. The other What other questions are there?
Uh,
Ah.
One second. What do you think? Oh, yeah. Onyx Prime. what do you think about the range of the Akash 1S? 1S. Um, I have been reading about 2K12UB SA6. Does initially 24 to 28 kilometer range. Over a period, it was enhanced to 35 kilometers, and in the latest variant, it has 55-kilometer range. Um, I don't remember the Akash range off the top of my head.
Akash range is 28 kilometers, 27,
Ah,
28 kilometers.
okay.
Now with a seeker, you can extend that, but of course, remember one thing: the integral rocket ramjet that the SA6 uses and the Akash also obviously uses, because the Akash was ultimately inspired by that all those many years ago. You can get much more performance out of that kind of a propulsion scheme if you can get a suitable enough fuel for it. Okay, so magnesium is not the only fuel that you may use in such a scheme. There are other things you can use also.
Oh yeah.
Ah,
Now, now,
so
now that you
so
reminded me, yeah,
yeah,
there is a program. There is a program for a different fuel for the Akash. So yeah, we'll see
yeah,
a range augmentation soon.
yeah,
Yeah, when
yeah,
it goes through the whole
yeah.
process of trials and
So so again,
validation.
another thing we'll talk about maybe
So yeah,
later,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So okay, there's a
For people
question.
who've watched this closely, I think you can find evidence for whatever we're saying in something that we've posted
By
over
the
the
way,
years.
okay, one thing: a bunch of people have transferred money already via the UPI link, and we thank them. And thank you for that. And I think others can emulate their example and
You
use
want
the
to read
QR
out the
code
names?
here and the UPI link to also send their support to DDR, show their support for DDR rather. Okay, now we are heading into the last final question of the day, after which we'll have to call it a night because
Nipun
stuff going on.
Gupta, again,
Yeah,
thank you. Not the first time. Thank you so much for
yeah,
your sustained support.
and
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Shouldn't we go for Black Shark torpedoes? They're the best in class, and our subs don't have any modern torpedoes. Um, yes and no, because we have our own program. So, see, this is the problem with having foreign platforms, right? So they create all sorts of obstacles to integrating your own torpedoes onto your own ships that you own. But because it runs their software, their management software, you have to integrate all of this to that, and to that you have to go to them hat in hand and say, "We'll give you whatever money you ask. Can you please do it?" And they can say no, maybe it'll take too long, you have to give us this, the information, that information, but it'll still be too long. Anybody who's had issues working with a third party contractor and getting them to do your work the way you wanted would probably not be would know what it entails, right? The contractor doesn't want to do one window replacement, he wants to do a whole house.
But
Right. So if you
people,
go
that's
to
how
him
they
and
make
say you
their
want a window
money.
repaired.
That's how they make their money. But a bunch of people will be jumping up for joy at this question, by the way, because they do want the black shark. I'll just say it.
because
And the
because there are
other,
people in Delhi
uh,
with suitcases roaming around, right, to distribute.
the But the
Yeah,
other thing is that the Varunastra derived, yeah, system that we have, at least for the kilo class, that is from what we hear, it has done quite well in trials, right? It has a fiber optic channel also. It is guided by a fiber optic channel. So let's see what happens and what
yeah.
doesn't happen. But
Dhruv Raman Singh,
hmm,
to answer your question on the Netra and how many and how fast we can induct, we need, I mean, the Air Force wants 6+6, six of the Mark 1A and six of the Mark 2, right? The Mark 1A is built on the same Embraer platform, and the Mark 2 is built on the Airbus A319 platforms that they got from Air India.
yeah.
It was
So
supposed
anyway,
to
so we are
happen
okay. One
to,
last
yeah,
question.
yeah.
Harshvardhan Patel asks difference between Oreshnik, Agni Merv, Kinzal, Rudram. Okay, okay. So okay, Kinzal and Rudram are probably more similar to each other than the Oreshnik, Agni Merv. See, Agni Merv also. You're right. Even in a sense, the Agni Merv configuration and the RS-26 Rube's sort of configuration is not that different. But in the case of the Oreshnik, if you've seen those videos carefully, each of the six multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles dispenses another 6 submunitions. So that is a very specific kind of capability, and I think, of course, that is something that India can develop and should develop, in my opinion, and should be used to knock out air bases rather quickly with just one or two strikes, maybe. So that is the thing. As far as the Kinzhal Rudram, Kinzhal is, of course, faster, I would say, and has certain more elements in it than or whether it does or not, we have to look. But Rudra Mark 3, if you're talking about that, from what we've seen from DRDO posters that were displayed at that sort of Vigyan Webhub exhibition. So the touchdown speed is usually, not hypersonic. Obviously, it is in the
It's just
supersonic
barely
range only.
supersonic.
Yeah, well, low supersonic. In the case of the Rudra Mark 3, it might be better than low supersonic, but not obviously not high supersonic. And Kinzhal, though, I think its touchdown speed is quite high, although it's not hypersonic either. I don't think Kinzhal sort of terminates, or its
People
terminal
do not
velocity.
understand
Uh,
how heavy air is to fly through at
yeah.
supersonic speeds at low levels, right? At altitude, the air is super thin, so it's easier to fly faster. At
Okay,
low levels, it's very difficult.
Ravi is saying we missed his super chat. Where is his super chat? Because this
Yeah,
is
I
the
have the
last
question
question.
lined up. Yeah,
Yeah.
C-17 can carry 10 to 40 JASM and launch them from 400 kilometers distance. One sortie, one PAF airbase gone. Not even hard tech. DRDO can achieve it with our own subsonic ALCM. Yes, the JASM is the air launched nearby itself has not been sanctioned, right? So even launching it from an aircraft, the program is not really gone anywhere, right? It's not gone off the ground at all. You're talking about palletized cruise missiles to be launched off transport aircraft. Um, Instead of the JASM, we are actually working on launching UAVs, right? From such palletized transports. So that is the way things are going. I think that might happen sooner than you're, pushing Nirbhais out of the back of a C-17.
But I can say one thing, okay? The era of subsonic cruise missiles is drawing to a close. And this low RCS kind of scheme, but something that flies at Mach 0.7 or Atmos 0.8 and has a small radar cross section. The era of this kind of system is actually not. This era has almost ended. Speed is the new stealth. Okay, speed is what really counts. I know there are proponents of the scalp and this that, but there is a reason why the PLARF has only 400 ground launch cruise missiles. Okay, it could have had 4,000 if it wanted to, but it does not have that many, because the cost benefit sort of ratio, the cost benefit ratio for these Tomahawk, the type of cruise missiles that the Tomahawk pioneered, the kind of cruise missile technology pioneered by the Tomahawk program, has now reached its sort of the end of its developmental cycle now. These are all.
Pakistan, yeah,
Yeah.
Pakistan might not have good point air
Yeah.
defense, but the Chinese have
Yeah,
filled
these
the
these
Tibetan
get
plateau with it.
these get these tend to get shot down. Shot down in this also, but in Ukraine also.
Yeah, with Iglas
Right.
also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the Chinese
So
have tons of those.
So if you build these and build them in numbers, they should be used slightly creatively, right? Basically, to light up the enemy's air defenses and then prosecute those with something else. In any case, you have to present the enemy integrated air defense systems with a variegated sort of threat profile, a variegated a mix of vectors, right? And those two, and that too in numbers. So you need speed, you need stealth, but speed is the new stealth, and you need numbers out there. Anyway, with this, we are now going to bring this particular edition of Indigenization Appreciation R to a close. Please continue to contribute via the UPI link and or QR code. Thank you to all those who have already contributed. We become much more regular with this program. We are going to be quite regular from now on, I think, and we are going to bring We are also going to put up different kinds of videos on our channel. I mean, educative, sort of educational videos, illustrative videos, etc. Support to ensure that we are regular and conscientious. I think you guys need to sort of egg us on a bit, and you know what that means. Do ask people to join this channel. Do ask them to spread the word about this channel. Do subscribe yourself if you haven't already. Do click the bell icon to get notifications and stuff like that, so on and so forth, and keep sending your support via various channels. So, with that, let's bring this particular edition to a close. As always, Jai Hind.
Thank you. Bye bye.